arrived early, because that is what you do when you've waited 8 years for a door to open. She checked her reflection in the elevator panel, pushed a stray hair into place, and told herself to breathe. The email from Daniel had been brief. "Let's discuss your advancement." And she had taken the hint like a person drowning takes a rope. She carried her notebook and a careful smile through the open office maze, nodding at teammates who already knew she deserved this. Her slides were printed, though no one had asked for slides. Prepared felt safe. Daniel's office was bright with winter light. The blinds were half drawn, making neat lines across the carpet. He stood when she entered, a good sign in older management books, and gestured to the round table near the window instead of his desk. That felt less good. His tie was new. She could tell because the tag thread still clung to the narrow tail. He smiled, the kind of smile that could be copied and pasted into any situation. "Laura, thanks for coming," he said. "Let's wait for the team." Her stomach dipped. Team? Promotions usually happened with one handshake, not witnesses. She sat anyway. The conference line beeped, and faces appeared in the doorway. Emma from media, Tom from analytics, 2 junior associates who always looked hopeful, and Ashley Monroe, the new hire with perfect handwriting and shoes that never made a sound. Ashley slid into a chair with the ease of someone who had never been told to earn her place twice. Laura's smile stayed in position. She could feel its edges. Daniel cleared his throat. "You all know we've been restructuring accounts to meet the new client mix. I want to acknowledge the extraordinary work done by Laura on North Star, Helios, and the Carter relaunch." He glanced at her, and for a second, her chest lifted. "Today, I'm excited to share a leadership update." This would be it. Finally, the title. Finally, the budget authority. Finally, no one asking who approved this when she was the one who had carried entire campaigns on 4 hours of sleep. She folded her hands to keep them steady. Ashley looked at Daniel with polite interest. Emma adjusted her glasses. Tom opened a new tab on his laptop. Tom always measured good news with a spreadsheet. "Effective immediately," Daniel said. "Ashley Monroe will take on the role of account lead for the Strategic Growth Cluster." The words reached Laura, then seemed to pause, as if waiting for clearance. They settled like a misdelivered package. Account lead for strategic growth was Laura's path. It was the job Daniel had hinted at for months, the job that made the late nights and canceled vacations make sense. She didn't move. If she didn't move, maybe the scene would reload. Someone clapped. It was one of the juniors, trained to applaud anything labeled effective immediately. Emma's mouth turned down for a fraction of a second. Blink and you would miss it. Tom stopped typing. Ashley lowered her gaze modestly, as if the title were shy and needed coaxing. "Laura," Daniel continued, "your ability to stabilize accounts has been invaluable. We're going to rely on your experience during the transition. You'll partner with Ashley over the next few weeks to hand off key relationships." There it was, the gentle rearrangement of her life into a supporting role. Laura nodded because her body remembered manners even when her mind had left the building. "Of course," she heard herself say. Her voice sounded fine. That was something. Inside, a smaller voice made a neat list. Smile, breathe, don't break in front of them. She held the smile. It was reliable, like her. Daniel talked about fresh perspectives and agility. Laura understood English. She did not need subtitles. Fresh meant new. Agility meant young. Both meant not you. She felt the heat crawl up her neck and pressed the notebook to her lap like a cold compress. Her sardonic mind, always helpful at the most inconvenient time, offered a line. "Congratulations, you have been promoted to unpaid teacher." She did not say it. She was very good at not saying things. "Thank you for the trust," Ashley said, in a soft voice that suggested she took care of fragile things. "I've learned so much from Laura already." "Have you?" Laura thought. "We've spoken twice about printer settings." She tucked the thought away for later, because bitterness is better served when you are not sitting 2 chairs from HR. The meeting dissolved into logistics. Who would contact Helios? Laura would, for now. Who had the deck for the Carter Q2 push? Laura did, of course. Could she share her notes on the North Star social shift? Laura could. Laura would. Laura had already done it. She wrote bullet points with steady handwriting and pretended the pen didn't dig into the paper. When it ended, there were handshakes. Ashley's hand was cool and light. "I hope we can work closely," she said. "Absolutely," Laura replied and marveled at her own acting. On the inside, closely like a shadow. Back at her desk, the open office looked exactly the same, which felt rude. Emails kept arriving, also rude. Emma stopped by and placed a coffee on Laura's table without comment. That kindness almost broke her more than the announcement. Laura sipped, burned her tongue, and decided that pain was useful. It kept you present. Slack lit up. A private message from Tom. "This is unexpected." She typed, "Company loves a plot twist," then deleted it and sent, "We adapt." Another from a junior, "Congrats to Ashley," with confetti. Laura added a thumbs up because emojis are cheaper than honesty. She stood and went to the window that looked over 7th Avenue. People moved with purpose. Cabs argued in short bursts of horn. The city didn't care who led strategic growth. It cared if you moved when the light changed. She exhaled and counted to 5, an old habit she had taught herself on deadline nights. The count brought her heart down from the ledge. Her phone vibrated with a calendar invite. Transition sync, Laura and Ashley, daily 9:15 to 9:45. Daily. She stared at the repeating event and thought, "So we're making this a ritual." Another email from Daniel. "Appreciate your professionalism. Your stability is exactly what we need right now." She smiled at the screen, a thin curve that said, "I hear you, even if I don't accept the terms." At noon, the team gathered for a cake someone had ordered because sugar is the office bandage of choice. "To new beginnings," Daniel said, lifting a paper plate. Laura swallowed a laugh that wasn't very nice and cut the first slice for Ashley. The knife went through the frosting in a clean line. She served, she nodded, she thanked people for stopping by her desk to say nothing in particular. By 3, the numbness had decided to stay. It was more practical than tears. Tears would demand explanations. Numbness let her answer emails and draft the Helios recap like a person whose job had not just been handed to a newcomer with quiet shoes. She finished the recap, attached her annotated timeline, and typed, "Happy to discuss." She was, in a way. Discussion meant time, and time meant space to decide what to feel. Before leaving, she packed the printed slides she hadn't used. She looked at the title page, Strategic Growth, Next Phase, and put the stack gently into the recycling bin. The paper made a soft sound as it fell. She thought, "That is the sound of something I earned being repurposed." Her sardonic mind added, "At least it will become something useful, like napkins." In the elevator down, she caught her reflection again. The same face, the same blazer, the same person who had walked in expecting a door to open. The difference was now inside, quiet and heavy. It asked a simple question, "What will you do about this?" The elevator dinged, the doors parted, and the lobby air felt cooler than morning. Outside, the light had shifted. People rushed past her, carrying late lunches and early regrets. Laura squared her shoulders and stepped into the flow. Today, she learned something important. You can be good, and it still won't be enough for someone who never planned to see you. She didn't have a plan yet. She had only the steady beat of her steps and the thin line of her mouth holding. The day had changed. She would too. The next morning, Laura arrived at her usual time, coffee in hand, expecting to find her desk as she had left it. Instead, Ashley was already there, perched in Laura's old chair like it had been made for her. Her leather bag, brand new and monogrammed, sat neatly where Laura's planner had once been. The desk was still decorated with Laura's framed photos, her potted plant, the novelty mug from last year's holiday party. Ashley looked up and smiled, as if she were the one doing Laura a favor by keeping them there. "Oh, I hope you don't mind," Ashley said, touching the plant. "I thought it made the space feel more homey." Laura forced a smile, the kind you give to a stranger holding your belongings. "It does," she replied, setting her coffee down on the temporary table by the copier that had apparently become her new workspace. From that angle, she could see everything. Ashley's gestures, the way she tilted her head when Daniel stopped by, the laughter that seemed a bit too melodic to be casual. The office wasn't large, so it was impossible not to notice how Daniel lingered by Ashley's desk longer than necessary, leaning on the partition in that relaxed way of his, as though they were discussing world-changing strategies instead of whatever made Ashley giggle behind her hand. The rest of the team adapted quickly. Emma remained polite but distant, and Tom gave Laura a look now and then, the kind that asked if she was okay without saying it. The juniors, though, were already orbiting Ashley, eager to be in the glow of her enthusiasm. Ashley had a way of making everyone feel like she was interested in their work, even if she asked the same questions twice. By lunchtime, Laura learned something else. Daniel and Ashley had a standing lunch appointment. They left together, coats in hand, while Daniel tossed a "be back in an hour" over his shoulder. Laura had never been taken to lunch alone by Daniel in all her years at the company. Team lunches, yes. Celebrations, yes. But never just the two of them. When they returned, Ashley had a small paper bag with a designer logo on it. She held it like it was nothing, but Laura caught the faint sparkle in her eyes. A gift. It was subtle enough to pass as a coincidence, but Laura's mind filed it away in a growing list of observations. The leniency was even more obvious in the afternoon. Ashley missed a call with a client, one Laura knew Daniel considered high maintenance, and when the client called back irritated, Daniel brushed it off with, "She's still learning, give her some time." When Laura had once been late to a call, she'd received a 3-paragraph email about accountability. The day stretched on in small humiliations. Ashley used Laura's pen holder, Laura's stapler, even the notepad she'd customized with her initials. She didn't mean to seem possessive. It was just that every item was a quiet reminder of the years Laura had put into building her place here. Around mid-afternoon, Ashley came over to Laura's temporary station. "I've been trying to make sense of the North Star files. Could you maybe walk me through them sometime? You seem to have everything so organized." The compliment sounded sweet enough, but Laura recognized it for what it was, a request for the kind of deep, unglamorous knowledge only experience could provide. "Of course," Laura said. "Let me know when you're free." Inside, she thought, "So I can teach you to replace me more efficiently." By 5 o'clock, Laura had seen enough to confirm what she already suspected. This wasn't about performance or fresh perspectives. It was about Daniel's favoritism, packaged neatly in professional language. Every interaction between him and Ashley carried a subtext the others might overlook, but Laura didn't. She couldn't. She'd been here too long not to notice. As the office began to empty, Laura stayed behind, pretending to finish an email while she watched Daniel stop by Ashley's desk once more. He leaned close, said something that made her laugh quietly, then glanced around the room as if checking for witnesses. When they left together again, not even trying to stagger their departures, Laura felt that same steady heat in her chest. She powered down her computer, gathered her things from the copier table, and looked over at her old desk. Still her things, but no longer hers. The plant looked healthy, thriving even. She wondered if it would still be alive by the time Ashley tired of watering it. As she stepped into the elevator, Laura's mind wasn't just replaying the day. It was cataloging it. Every smile, every gift, every excuse made on Ashley's behalf was a data point. She didn't know yet what she'd do with the information, but she knew she wouldn't forget a single detail. Outside, the city was settling into its evening rhythm, streetlights blinking on as people hurried toward dinner plans and warm apartments. Laura walked slowly, letting the cold air clear the last traces of forced smiles from her face. This wasn't just about a desk or a title anymore. It was about respect, and she could feel the first stirrings of a plan forming, quiet but certain. Tomorrow, she decided, she'd watch even closer. And she'd make sure Daniel and Ashley never saw it coming. By the end of the week, Laura had perfected the art of looking busy while listening. It wasn't a conscious plan at first, just something that happened when your desk was within earshot of Daniel's office, and you had a knack for catching words between the hum of the copier and the ring of someone's phone. On Thursday morning, she was drafting an email when she heard it, soft laughter filtering through the thin glass wall of Daniel's office. Ashley's laugh was distinctive, like a ringtone you couldn't unhear. It started low, then rose in quick bursts, The kind of laugh you didn't use in regular work conversations unless the topic was far from quarterly reports. Laura sipped her coffee and told herself she wasn't listening. Except she was. A few words floated out between giggles. Weekend plans. Out of the city. And, don't worry, I'll make an excuse. Her fingers froze over the keyboard. Weekend plans? Out of the city? She almost typed it into the subject line of her email out of reflex. She glanced toward the office just in time to see the blinds tilt slightly, as though someone had brushed against them. Daniel's voice was too low to catch, but Ashley's answering hum carried enough warmth to heat a small apartment. Laura rolled her eyes and thought, of course, nothing says leadership like mysterious closed-door meetings with the new hire. The day continued in its usual pattern: emails, calls, a quick lunch at her desk. Late in the afternoon, as people began packing up, Laura noticed Ashley was still in Daniel's office. The lights were dimmer now, shadows stretching long across the carpet. By 6:30, the place was nearly empty. Laura stayed, claiming she needed to finish a report, but really, she was waiting. At 7, the door opened. Ashley stepped out first, her hair slightly tousled, lipstick no longer the precise crimson she'd applied that morning. Daniel followed, adjusting his tie in that subtle way men do when they think no one is looking. They both paused when they saw Laura still at her desk. "Oh, Laura," Ashley said, her voice light. "You're still here?" "Just wrapping up," Laura replied, smiling politely. "Some of us like to make sure the work gets done before the weekend." It was the kind of line that could pass as harmless, or not, depending on how much guilt was sitting in your chest. Ashley gave a small laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes, then walked toward the elevator. Daniel mumbled something about locking up before following her. Laura watched them go, tapping her pen against the desk. Workplace romance cliché number 1, stay late together. She made a mental note to start a list. The next morning, the air in the office buzzed with fragments of conversation. In the break room, 2 junior associates whispered over their coffee. Laura caught the tail end of it, saw them near the Ritz, looked cozy. She poured herself tea, acting as though she hadn't heard a thing. Gu Man's style of understatement came naturally to her. Sometimes it was more powerful to let people talk and simply file it away. Around midday, Daniel called a sudden meeting for the strategic growth team. Ashley arrived 5 minutes late, breezy and unapologetic. "Traffic," she said, sliding into a chair next to Daniel. Laura noted how he didn't so much as raise an eyebrow. When Laura had been late once, because of a subway delay, she'd received a pointed reminder about punctuality. As the meeting dragged on, Laura's mind wandered. She imagined narrating the situation like a romance novel blurb. She was the ambitious newcomer. He was the married boss with too much charm. Together, they broke every HR guideline in the book. She almost smirked at the thought, but kept her expression neutral. Later that afternoon, Laura went to the copy room and found Ashley already there, leaning against the counter with her phone in hand. Ashley's voice was low but urgent. "Yes, Saturday? No, she doesn't suspect a thing." A pause, then a soft laugh. "Of course, I'll be careful." Laura made a small noise as she entered, pretending she hadn't heard. Ashley startled slightly, then smiled. "Just confirming dinner plans with a friend," she said. "Hope it's somewhere nice," Laura replied, her tone light. Inside, she thought, nice enough to justify lipstick touch-ups after office hours, apparently. By the time Laura left that evening, the whispers had multiplied. She didn't chase them, didn't need to. They came to her, carried on casual remarks and sideways glances. And she listened, storing each detail in the growing archive in her mind. She knew better than to confront them now. Timing was everything. For now, she'd watch. She'd collect every cliché, every whispered plan, every smudged trace of lipstick. Because if Daniel and Ashley wanted to turn the office into their private stage, Laura was more than willing to be the quiet audience in the back row, waiting for the perfect moment to bring up the house lights. By Monday, Laura's curiosity had shifted from passive observation to something sharper, more deliberate. She told herself it wasn't personal anymore. It was research, the kind you did quietly, without letting the subjects know they were being studied. After all, She had spent years mastering the art of reading clients' moods. Applying those skills here felt almost natural. The first thing she did was start monitoring Daniel's calendar. She still had partial access to shared meetings from her previous role, and though many of his appointments were labeled with vague terms like strategy session or external touchpoint, the patterns told their own story. Ashley's name popped up more than once as a private attendee, always in time slots that conveniently overlapped with Daniel's extended lunch breaks. During the day, Laura began keeping her earbuds in, but with the music off, so she could hear without looking like she was listening. This trick paid off almost immediately. One afternoon, she caught Ashley on the phone saying, "No, he can't that night. He's with her. I'll explain later." The words were soft, but clear enough to wedge themselves into Laura's mind. Her. There was only one her in this context, Daniel's wife. Laura didn't share much with anyone, but Emma, her quiet, observant colleague, had a way of picking up on things. That Wednesday, Emma stopped by her temporary desk and placed a file on top. "Might interest you," she said, her tone casual. Inside was a printout of the building's conference room bookings. Laura scanned the list and found 3 after-hours meetings booked under Daniel's name with no official agenda. The attendees were blank. "They didn't even bother to hide it," Emma murmured. Laura closed the folder, sliding it into her drawer. "Thanks," she said simply. They didn't need to spell out what both already suspected. The more Laura pieced together, the more obvious the gaps became. Ashley's work output was strangely light for someone in her new position. Deadlines were pushed, deliverables mysteriously reassigned, yet Daniel never mentioned it in meetings. When Ashley did present, Daniel would lean back, smiling like a proud coach, even if her ideas were recycled from previous campaigns. It was late Thursday evening when Laura got the clearest confirmation yet. Most of the office had cleared out hours earlier. Laura stayed behind, finishing a proposal, the quiet hum of the building wrapping around her like a blanket. At 8:15, she heard the soft click of Daniel's office door. She glanced up to see Ashley stepping out, coat over her arm, hair slightly mussed, in a way that didn't match the pristine style she'd had that morning. Daniel followed a few steps behind, holding his phone in one hand and locking his office with the other. As they walked toward the elevator, their hands brushed, not the accidental kind, but the slow, familiar kind that lingered a beat too long. Ashley laughed at something Daniel said, the sound echoing in the nearly empty space. Laura kept her head down, pretending to be absorbed in her screen, but her peripheral vision caught everything. The way Daniel looked at Ashley, soft, almost indulgent. The way Ashley leaned in just enough that it felt intimate without crossing an obvious line in public. It was choreography, and they were practice dancers. When the elevator doors slid open, Daniel glanced around the floor, his eyes briefly passing over Laura. For a moment, she wondered if he'd feel compelled to explain why he and Ashley were leaving together so late. He didn't. They stepped inside, the doors closing with a quiet sigh. Laura exhaled slowly, letting the silence fill the space they'd left behind. She sat there for a few minutes, staring at her reflection in the darkened monitor. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't being paranoid. The signs were there, clear, repetitive, and impossible to ignore now. On her way out that night, she passed the security desk. The guard, an older man who had worked the night shift for years, gave her a nod. "Late one tonight?" he asked. "Just finishing some things," she replied. Then, after a pause, "Seems I'm not the only one." He gave a small, knowing smile. "Some folks are always here after hours. Keeps the building interesting." Laura returned the smile, but said nothing else. The truth didn't need embellishment. As she stepped into the cold night air, the city lights reflected off wet pavement, and she tightened her coat around her. Every piece she had gathered so far felt like a puzzle slowly taking shape. She didn't have the full picture yet, but she was getting closer. She wasn't sure what her next move would be, but one thing was certain: Daniel and Ashley were careless. And in a place like this, carelessness was a luxury that could cost more than either of them realized. Laura intended to be there when it did. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind that usually slid by without notice. Laura was in the break room, waiting for the coffee machine to finish its slow drip, when Owen from IT walked in. He was friendly enough, the type who preferred servers and code to office politics, but he liked small talk. "Crazy what people think is private these days," he said, shaking his head as he poured his coffee. Laura glanced over. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing specific," Owen replied with a smirk. "Just saw someone trying to delete a bunch of old emails and forget we keep backups. Guess they didn't realize that's not how it works." He shrugged, clearly enjoying the small drama without giving away too much. Something in his tone made Laura's instincts prickle. "Let me guess," she said lightly. "Someone we know?" Owen raised an eyebrow, then grinned. "You didn't hear it from me, but let's just say our fearless leader and his favorite new hire have been emailing a lot after hours, and not about work." Laura didn't press. She knew better than to make people feel cornered. Instead, she let out a soft laugh. "Office romances. They should really get a new storyline." Owen chuckled, but as he left, he tapped the counter beside her cup. "Check your inbox later. You might find something interesting." An hour later, Laura opened an email from Owen with the subject line, "FYI." No explanation, just a zipped folder. She clicked it open carefully, her heart beating faster with each file name that popped up. Inside were several attachments, blurry but unmistakable photos of Daniel and Ashley at an upscale restaurant downtown. The table was lit with soft candlelight, wine glasses nearly touching, their heads leaning close in conversation. One shot caught Ashley smiling at Daniel in a way no employee looked at their married boss. Alongside the photos were scanned booking receipts from the restaurant, 2 covers, signed with Daniel's corporate card. The dates lined up with nights Laura remembered them leaving the office late. She sat back, staring at the screen. For a moment, she felt almost detached, like she was looking at a scene from a film she already knew the ending to. But the longer she looked, the more the detachment faded, replaced by a slow, steady heat in her chest. It wasn't just that Daniel had replaced her with Ashley. It wasn't even that he was blatantly favoring her in front of the whole office. It was that he was doing it while still married to Vanessa, his wife who had visited the office just weeks ago, smiling, kind, asking Laura about her projects as if she were part of the extended work family. Laura opened a browser and searched for Daniel Carter wife. It took less than a minute to find a photo of Daniel and Vanessa from a charity gala earlier in the year. Vanessa's smile was warm, her hand looped through Daniel's arm, clearly proud to stand beside him. There had been no press release about a separation, no rumors of trouble, nothing to suggest she knew about Ashley. Laura closed the tab and leaned back in her chair, the pieces sliding into place in her mind. Daniel wasn't just unethical as a boss, he was reckless as a husband. And Ashley wasn't just the lucky newcomer, she was actively playing a role in this. She thought about the plant still sitting on her old desk, about the meetings Daniel and Ashley had shared behind closed doors, the smudged lipstick, the knowing glances. She remembered Vanessa's visit, how Ashley had been overly sweet that day, her smile a little too perfect. For a few minutes, Laura simply sat there, letting the reality settle. She wasn't shaking with rage. That would have been too easy, too loud. Instead, what came was a quieter, colder determination, the kind that didn't burn out quickly. She knew the danger of rushing. The smart move was to gather, to wait, to make sure that when she acted, it would be undeniable. She dragged Owen's email into a hidden folder on her personal drive, labeling it innocuously as Q3 Notes. Then she copied the files to a flash drive she kept for client backups. Evidence was like insurance. You hoped you wouldn't need it, but you slept better knowing it was there. That afternoon, she watched Daniel and Ashley in the conference room, their heads bent over a single laptop screen, laughing at something no one else could hear. She felt no urge to interrupt. Let them keep thinking the office was their playground. Let them underestimate her. When Emma passed by her desk later, she gave Laura a questioning look. Laura only smiled, a small private smile that said, "I know more than I'm letting on." Emma didn't ask. She didn't need to. By the time Laura left the office, the city was alive with evening rush, headlights painting the streets in gold and white. She walked without hurry, the flash drive in her bag like a quiet weight. She didn't have to decide tonight how she would use it. But she knew this much. Daniel and Ashley had written their own downfall. All Laura had to do was decide when to read it aloud. For the rest of the week, Laura carried the knowledge like an invisible stone in her bag, heavy enough to notice with every step, impossible to set down. The photos, the receipts, the confirmation that Daniel was still married, they were all tucked safely away, but her mind kept returning to them at odd moments. During morning coffee, she'd remember Ashley's smudged lipstick. While reviewing campaign budgets, she'd see Vanessa's warm smile from her visit. Even at night, brushing her teeth, the images would slip back in like unwelcome guests. She didn't doubt the truth anymore. What she doubted was what to do with it. Friday evening, she decided to get out of her apartment before she went in circles again. Her brother Mark had texted earlier, suggesting dinner. He was the kind of older brother who noticed things even when you didn't say them outright, which was exactly why Laura hesitated before agreeing. But now, sitting across from him in a quiet corner of their favorite Italian place, she realized she wanted to say it out loud to someone who wasn't part of the office. "You've been quiet lately," Mark said, twirling his fork through pasta, "and not your usual thinking about ad campaigns quiet." Laura managed a small smile. "It's work, something complicated." He leaned back. "Complicated like you don't want to talk about it, or complicated like you're debating if it'll ruin lives?" The directness caught her off guard. She sipped her water before answering. "Both." Mark waited, the way he always did when he sensed she was working up to something. Finally, she told him, leaving out names, but describing enough that the picture was clear. The favoritism, the affair, the evidence sitting on her flash drive. When she finished, Mark let out a low whistle. "That's a mess." "Exactly," Laura said. "And if I expose it, it won't just be Daniel. Ashley's career would be over. His wife would." She trailed off, thinking of Vanessa's face again. "It would hurt a lot of people. But if I do nothing, I'm basically saying it's fine for him to get away with it. It's not just the cheating, it's what he's doing at work. He handed her my job, Mark. My job. And no one will call him out because he's the boss." Mark tapped his fingers on the table. "So what's stopping you? Afraid of being the bad guy?" Laura looked down at her plate. "Afraid of becoming like him. Someone who plays games with people's lives." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The restaurant's soft background music filled the space between them. Finally, Mark said, "There's a difference between revenge and accountability. If you were just trying to humiliate him for fun, that'd be one thing. But this? You're talking about exposing the truth. Sometimes that's the only way to stop it from happening again." His words settled in her mind like a weight shifting from one side of the scale to the other. She wasn't sure if it tipped the balance yet, but it gave her something to hold on to. On the walk home, the winter air bit at her cheeks. She kept turning Mark's words over in her head, revenge versus accountability. The line between them felt thin, but maybe it was more about intent. Was she doing this just to get back at Daniel, or because it was wrong to let him keep abusing his position? Back in her apartment, she sat on the couch, flash drive in hand. The little piece of metal looked harmless, but she knew it held the power to change everything. She imagined the fallout. Daniel's resignation, Ashley's swift exit, the gossip flooding the office, Vanessa's heartbreak. It wouldn't just be a headline in the company newsletter. It would be an earthquake. Laura set the drive on the coffee table and leaned back, closing her eyes. She thought about all the times she'd worked late for Daniel, all the weekends she'd given up for deadlines, all the moments she'd stayed quiet because it was easier than making waves. And now, here she was, with a choice that could be louder than anything she'd ever said. She didn't decide that night. Instead, she left the flash drive where she could see it, a reminder that the choice was hers. And whether she had tomorrow or a month from now, she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't let the weight of knowing crush her. When she moved, it would be because she was ready, and because she knew exactly what she wanted the outcome to be. For now, she'd carry it, but she wouldn't carry it forever. By Monday morning, Laura had decided that storming into Daniel's office with a folder of evidence was too easy and too predictable. A direct confrontation would let them rally, spin their story, maybe even paint her as bitter and unprofessional. She wanted something slower, sharper. If they thought they were safe, every hint would land harder. Her first move came during the weekly team meeting. Ashley was rattling off a list of upcoming client visits when Laura leaned forward, her tone polite but carrying just enough weight to make people listen. "Interesting," Laura said. "I didn't realize Westbrook & Co. was having on-site meetings in Boston this quarter. Last I checked, their team was fully remote." The room went quiet for a moment. Ashley blinked, her smile tight. "Oh well, Daniel suggested it might be a good opportunity to strengthen the relationship." "Of course, right," Laura replied, making a note on her pad. "I just want to make sure travel expenses match actual client needs. Helps keep the budget clean." Her voice was light, but she could feel the glance Daniel shot her, quick and sharp. That afternoon, she left a printed schedule for the strategic growth team on Daniel's desk. On the bottom corner, in small but clear letters, she had highlighted 2 overlapping bookings. One for a client meeting in the city, and one for Ashley's offsite in another state on the same day. She didn't add a comment. She didn't have to. The next day, Laura passed by Daniel's office and saw the paper neatly turned face down on his desk. He was speaking to Ashley in low tones, his expression tight. When he noticed Laura in the doorway, his voice lifted into something more casual. "Thanks for the updated schedule, Laura. Very thorough." She smiled, always happy to help keep things accurate. Her second strike was subtler still. She forwarded an old campaign analysis to the entire team, noting in the email, "For reference when planning future client dinners, see pages 7 to 9 for optimal locations based on ROI." Pages 7 to 9 contained a chart listing venues, including the upscale restaurant where she had those damning receipts of Daniel and Ashley's private dinner. No one else batted an eye, but she saw Ashley's shoulders stiffen when she scrolled. By midweek, the atmosphere in the office had changed. Conversations stopped when Laura walked past. Ashley's cheerful tone in meetings was a little too rehearsed. Daniel seemed to linger less by her desk, though his door still closed more often than before. Emma noticed, of course. "You're doing something," she murmured over coffee. Laura shrugged. "I'm just doing my job. Maybe they're the ones feeling off balance." On Thursday, Laura found a perfect opportunity to push further. During a small brainstorming session, someone mentioned the possibility of hosting a weekend retreat for select clients. Laura turned to Ashley with a polite smile. "You're great at organizing things. Maybe you could share your experience planning weekend trips? You seem to have a knack for it." Ashley hesitated just a fraction too long before replying, "Oh, well, most of that is just personal travel." "Still," Laura said, "good planning is good planning. You could teach us all a thing or two." Emma coughed into her coffee, hiding a grin. That evening, Laura made sure to leave another small reminder, an old invoice for a corporate dinner, for 2, slipped casually into the folder of expense reports Daniel had requested. She didn't staple it or mark it. She just left it sitting on top, where the date and venue would be the first things he saw. The next morning, Daniel's door stayed closed until nearly lunch. Ashley emerged first, her expression carefully neutral. Daniel followed a few minutes later, looking like he just finished an argument. Laura kept her eyes on her screen, tapping out an email as though she hadn't noticed. By the end of the week, the tension in the office felt almost tangible. Conversations were shorter, laughter rarer. Laura, however, moved through the days with the same calm demeanor she'd always had. She offered help on projects, brought coffee to colleagues, and stayed just late enough to be seen as dependable without overdoing it. She wasn't attacking, at least, not in any way they could call out. She was simply present, watching, making sure Daniel and Ashley knew that someone else in the room could see through the polished smiles and late-night work sessions. Every veiled comment, every conveniently placed document, was a quiet tap on the glass of their fragile little world. And Laura intended to keep tapping until the cracks began to show. It was a perfectly ordinary Thursday morning. Emails, half-warm coffee, the usual background hum of keyboards, until the elevator dinged and outstepped Vanessa Carter. Laura spotted her immediately. Vanessa had that effortless elegance that made people turn twice. Sleek black coat, soft cashmere scarf, hair falling in deliberate waves over her shoulders. She carried herself with the calm confidence of someone who had never once worried about being welcome in a room. The reception area lit up. The junior associates straightened in their chairs, Emma smiled, and even Tom, who usually hid behind his monitor, got up to greet her. "Mrs. Carter," the receptionist said warmly. "What a surprise!" "I was in the neighborhood," Vanessa replied with an easy smile. "Thought I'd stop by and take my husband to lunch." Laura stayed where she was, watching as Vanessa's gaze swept the room. She could feel the moment Vanessa's eyes landed on Ashley. Ashley rose from Laura's old desk, that perfectly practiced smile already in place. "Hello, I'm Ashley Monroe. We've met briefly, I think." Vanessa's smile didn't falter. "Yes, you joined the team recently, right? I've heard good things." Laura bit back a laugh. "I bet you have." Ashley's hands clasped in front of her, her posture just a little too stiff. Laura could see the tiniest flicker in her eyes, the microsecond calculation of how to act around the wife of the man she was having an affair with. It was almost entertaining. "Can I get you some coffee, Mrs. Carter?" Laura called out, standing. "That would be lovely, thank you, Laura," Vanessa said warmly. She remembered Laura's name, which felt like a small victory. As Laura passed Ashley on the way to the break room, she gave her a quick smile. "Black with a little sugar, right?" she said over her shoulder to Vanessa, loud enough for Ashley to hear. "Daniel mentioned you prefer it that way." Ashley's smile tightened just slightly. Laura wasn't lying. Vanessa had mentioned her coffee preference herself during her last visit, but the way she phrased it was deliberate. Let the reminder hang there. Daniel talks to me too. When Laura returned with the coffee, Vanessa was chatting with Emma about last year's charity gala. Daniel emerged from his office, surprise flickering across his face before he quickly recovered. "Vanessa, what are you doing here?" "Taking my husband to lunch," she said, kissing his cheek. Daniel glanced toward Ashley for the briefest moment, just long enough for Laura to catch it, before turning his attention back to Vanessa. They chatted for a few minutes in the open area, Vanessa effortlessly engaging with the team. Laura leaned against her desk, sipping her own coffee, the scene playing out like a quiet stage drama. Ashley stood nearby, chiming in when necessary, but otherwise keeping her gaze carefully neutral. "Laura," Vanessa said suddenly, "you must join us for lunch sometime. Daniel's told me how invaluable you've been to the company." Laura smiled. "That's kind of you. I'd like that." It wasn't the invitation that mattered. It was the way Ashley's eyes flicked toward her when she said it. There was a quiet tension now, a tiny crack in Ashley's polished image that Laura couldn't unsee. When Daniel finally ushered Vanessa toward the elevator, Laura caught Ashley exhaling, her shoulders dropping ever so slightly. "Lovely to see you, Ashley," Vanessa said as she left. "I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other." The moment they were gone, Ashley returned to her desk, pulling her chair in a little too quickly. Laura strolled past, pausing just long enough to set a file down. "Vanessa's even more impressive in person, isn't she?" she said casually. Ashley's jaw tightened before she forced a smile. "Yes, she's very gracious." Laura kept walking, hiding the smirk that tugged at her lips. She told herself she shouldn't enjoy it so much, but the truth was, watching Ashley's composure crack, just slightly, was satisfying in a way that felt almost dangerous. Still, beneath the quiet triumph was a flicker of something else: guilt. Vanessa had been nothing but kind to her. She didn't deserve the mess she was about to inherit. Back at her desk, Laura typed out an email, her fingers moving automatically while her thoughts stayed on the scene she'd just witnessed. The perfect image Daniel and Ashley had tried to project was already starting to crumble. And Laura, calm and collected, was more than willing to keep applying pressure until it broke completely. The morning of the quarterly client presentation arrived with the usual rush. Final checks on slides, printed handouts neatly stacked, the air in the boardroom carrying that sharp scent of fresh coffee and tension. Daniel was at the head of the table, in his best navy suit, greeting board members and key clients with practiced charm. Ashley sat 2 seats away from him, flipping through her notes, her smile bright but tight. Laura took her seat at the far end, near the coffee service, where she could see everyone without being in the spotlight. She wasn't presenting today, but she was there to support the team. Daniel's words, not hers. In reality, she had a different task in mind. She had woken that morning knowing it was time. Weeks of subtle moves, of watching cracks form, had led to this moment. The flash drive was already plugged into her laptop. In one window, the presentation slides. In another, an email draft addressed to Vanessa Carter. No subject line. Just a single sentence, "You deserve to know," and the attached folder, the photos, the receipts, everything. She waited until Daniel began his opening remarks, his voice steady as he launched into the company's growth figures. He was in his element, feeding off the nods and murmurs of approval around the table. Ashley glanced at him with that mix of admiration and calculated deference, the kind of look Laura now found almost theatrical. Laura's fingers moved without hesitation. She clicked send. The email slipped away silently. A stone dropped into still water. She took a slow sip of her coffee, the bitterness grounding her. 10 minutes later, as Daniel was halfway through a slide about market projections, the glass doors at the back of the room swung open. Every head turned. Vanessa stood there, coat draped over one arm, phone in hand. Her eyes were locked on Daniel, not with warmth, but with a cold, focused intensity that made the room seem smaller. "Vanessa?" Daniel's voice faltered for the first time that morning. "What are you?" She strode in, ignoring the startled faces around her. "What am I doing here?" she repeated, her voice sharp enough to cut the air. "I'm here because I just received an email. An email with photographs, receipts, proof of you taking her," she pointed at Ashley, "to private dinners, booking hotel rooms, using company money to fund your little affair." The room went dead silent. Ashley's face drained of color, her hands frozen on the table. "This is highly inappropriate," Daniel began, his tone a strained attempt at authority. "What's inappropriate?" Vanessa snapped. "Is parading your mistress around the office while I've been supporting you for years. What's inappropriate is stealing someone else's job to give it to her. Did you think no one would notice? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" The board members exchanged looks, some leaning back as if to avoid being too close to the blast radius. Clients glanced between Daniel and Vanessa, their expressions a mix of shock and curiosity. Ashley tried to speak. "Mrs. Carter, this isn't—" "Don't," Vanessa cut in. "Don't insult me by pretending." Daniel's jaw tightened. "We should discuss this privately." "No," Vanessa said. "You've humiliated me publicly. We'll discuss it right here, with all the people you've been lying to." From her seat, Laura lifted her coffee cup again, hiding the slight curve of her mouth behind it. She kept her gaze neutral, an observer among witnesses. She didn't need to say a word. The truth was already unspooling in front of everyone. A board member cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should reconvene after a short break." Vanessa ignored him. "You can figure out your numbers without me, or without your clients, once they hear about the kind of man running this company." She turned to leave, pausing only to give Daniel one last look, cool, final, without a trace of the woman who had walked into the office smiling weeks ago. When the doors closed behind her, the room was left in a stunned hush. Daniel's face was pale, his tie slightly askew. Ashley stared at her notes as if they might swallow her whole. Laura set her cup down gently on its saucer. "Shall we continue?" she asked, her voice calm, almost bored. No one answered. The meeting broke apart within minutes, clients muttering excuses, board members huddling near the windows. Daniel disappeared into his office without a word. Ashley followed a moment later, her heels clicking too fast against the polished floor. Laura gathered her things slowly, slipping her laptop into her bag. Outside the boardroom, the usual office noise seemed muted, as though everyone knew something irreversible had just happened. She didn't feel triumphant exactly, just steady. The weight she'd been carrying was gone, replaced by a lightness she hadn't felt in months. As she passed the reception desk, she caught Emma's eye. Emma gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "I know." Laura stepped into the elevator, the doors closing on the fractured quiet of the floor above. Whatever happened next, for Daniel or Ashley, was no longer her burden. She had revealed the truth. The rest would take care of itself. The fallout came quietly, like snow settling after a storm. In the weeks that followed the boardroom confrontation, Daniel's once commanding presence in the office seemed to shrink day by day. First, he canceled meetings. Then, he stopped making the morning rounds. Rumors floated between desks, board inquiries, client complaints, whispered phone calls that ended with doors slamming shut. By the third week, the official email went out. Daniel Carter has resigned, effective immediately. There was no farewell speech, no handshake tour, no parting cake in the break room. He simply vanished. His office cleared over a weekend. The blinds stayed closed for days afterward, as if the room itself wanted to be left alone. Ashley lasted less than a week after that. One morning, her desk was empty, the plant she'd inherited from Laura gone, her chair pushed in neatly as if she'd never been there. HR sent out a one-line announcement about her pursuing other opportunities, and that was the end of it. No one asked where she went. The gossip burned hot for a while, then dulled. New projects rolled in, deadlines loomed, and people moved on. That was the way of offices. Scandals became background noise, replaced by whatever was urgent that week. By the end of the month, no one mentioned Daniel or Ashley out loud anymore. Laura's old position was filled by a competent, if unremarkable, manager from another department. She didn't get her title back, and she didn't ask for it. The truth was, she didn't want to sit at that desk again. She'd already reclaimed something far more important, her sense of self. Her days felt lighter now. She no longer carried the constant knot of resentment or the heavy secret she had once guarded. She came in, did her work, helped her team when needed, and left without the shadow of Daniel's favoritism poisoning the air. Emma noticed the change. "You seem calmer," she remarked one afternoon over coffee. Laura smiled. "I think I finally stopped fighting the wrong battles." She still caught the occasional sideways glance in the hall, the kind that said, "We know you had something to do with it," but no one confronted her. And she didn't confirm or deny. Let people think what they wanted. On the last Friday before the holiday break, Laura stayed a little later to finish up a proposal. The office was quiet, the kind of quiet that only happened when most people had already gone home. She shut down her computer, slipped her coat on, and paused for a moment, looking around the space. The desks, the hum of the heater, the faint scent of coffee. It was all the same, yet she felt different standing there. Stronger. Not because she had won anything in the traditional sense, but because she had walked through the fire without losing herself. In the elevator, her reflection in the brushed metal doors caught her eye. She didn't look like someone plotting revenge or carrying a grudge. She looked content, and that, she realized, was the real victory. The lobby doors opened to a crisp winter evening. The air was sharp and clean, the streetlights casting a golden glow on the snow-dusted sidewalks. People hurried past, bundled in scarves and hats, their breath turning into soft clouds in the cold. Laura stepped outside and let the air fill her lungs. She didn't think about Daniel or Ashley. She didn't think about what could have been if things had gone differently. She thought about the weekend ahead, about the simple pleasure of not checking work email until Monday, about the quiet joy of knowing she had acted on her own terms. She walked down the street, her boots crunching against the thin layer of frost. Somewhere behind her, the office lights glowed against the dark sky, but she didn't look back. Halfway to the corner, she realized she was smiling. Not the polite smile she wore in meetings, but a real one. It wasn't because she had outmaneuvered them, or because they were gone. It was because she was free. And that, she thought as she turned toward the subway entrance, was worth more than any title.